This is an exciting day. So we're back in Terrebonne Parish yet again, making an announcement on the start of a new project for coastal protection. This time, 3 barrier islands. Weeks Marine has the contract to do the work. It's about $160 million worth of work that we're getting out of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. And so we're excited about that. These dollars were made available from the Deepwater BP Horizon oil spill, and they're designated for 2 particular purposes. One could be river diversion, the other for these barrier island restorations. And so that's what we're talking about today, because we know barrier islands literally are the very first line of defense. But in addition to that, great habitat for birds and other wildlife, and they very much help with fisheries as well. So this is another $160 million commitment that we're making to restoration here in the Terrebonne area, and a total of $1.5 billion with a B, in projects that have either been completed, under construction, or currently in planning and design for Terrebonne Parish with respect to restoration and protection under the CPRA. So this is another exciting day, and we're moving as fast as we can move with the resources that we have, because restoration and protection is that important. And this is a reminder, we're still in hurricane season. We need people to put themselves and their families in a better position to withstand a hurricane should we get one in the next month and a half or 2 months. So asking people to really do that, get a game plan. You can go to getagameplan.org, and it'll tell you exactly what you should do to go about making sure you and your family are as best prepared as can be.
So our barrier islands really serve as our first line of defense in coastal Louisiana. And so if you're familiar with the master plan, the litany of projects, if you will, the portfolio of projects that are included in the master plan are really multiple lines of defense. And if you look across the perimeter of our state, we've got our first line of defense is our barrier island. So when a storm is coming on shore, that is the first speed bump that a storm hits to knock that storm surge down. But additionally, from a restoration standpoint and an environmental standpoint, creates migratory bird habitat, fisheries habitat, things of that nature. So it's a win-win from a protection standpoint and an environmental restoration standpoint.
In the recorded history of Terrebonne Parish, there's never been over 9.5 foot of water. But the last time we had 9.5 foot of water, 11,000 homes flooded in Terrebonne Parish. Since the levee system's been built with the floodgate on the barrier, we had 9 foot of water, and we had 2 homes flood in Terrebonne and 5 homes in Lafourche, because the community is just divided by a small bayou. And that's only because the levee system in Lafourche side was not complete yet. So, I mean, we've come a long way. 7 homes is still too many to flood. But the people of Terrebonne Parish tax themselves, 3/4 cent sales tax, to build a levee system, and the state put up about $200 million, and we're moving forward, and this is just more money into the construction phase.
It means that we're getting $160 million for coastal erosion and hurricane protection in our barrier islands. So we have protection, so when those hurricanes come, that we don't have to worry. That barrier helps us, and also having the rocks that the governor plans on placing with that $160 million, it's going to protect the area from having flooding and also protect the barrier island. So it's a win-win.
I want to thank all the people of Terrebonne Parish for having us here today. You know, I was just looking out into the audience, and I noticed, all of the different stakeholder groups that are here and all of the different organizations that are represented here. And it really makes you just realize how unique and how great coastal Louisiana is. We all come from different places, we all have various interests, but when it comes to this issue, the issue of hurricane protection and coastal restoration, I think we're all unified. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. Days like today and events like this one show us what we can accomplish when you have a state led by a governor that works very closely with a local parish government to implement projects that we both want to see move forward. It's what happens when you have a federal government through the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management supporting the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority to gain access to critical sediment sources off of our coast. It's what happens when you have strong partnerships with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Mr. Tanner Johnson, who you're going to hear from shortly, who continue to partner with us every day to restore our coast. It's what happens when you have environmental groups proudly standing right next to hurricane protection advocates and representatives of the energy sector. So today, I think it is an example of what we can accomplish when we all work together. I also think it's safe to say here this afternoon that under this administration, the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority has really hit its stride. The projects we have been rolling out over the past 4 years, and those that we have coming up over the next several years, are truly game changers for our coast. We finally have the funding to match our ambitions, and we have the experts and leaders in place to make our plans a reality. I also want to take a moment, if I could, to thank the CPRA staff. We have a lot of staff that are here today, particularly Bryn Haas, who oversees our implementation efforts. We got Greg Grandy, and we also have Miss April Newman, who served as the project manager for the three projects that the governor is going to be announcing shortly. April also, I'm very pleased to say, is CPRA's Employee of the Quarter. So congratulations to you, April. But I want to thank all of the CPRA staff, and particularly the Governor's Office of Coastal Activities staff that are here. I also want to thank the people that are standing behind me, and you're going to hear from each of these individuals here shortly. But I want to recognize Parish President Gordy Dove, who never seems to stop asking us for money. Where is he?
He's already asked me for some since I got here today.
But you know, I think he keeps asking for it because we keep giving it to him. So why not? But I think to say that Gordy Dove is committed to this issue would be a great understatement. Gordy works very, very hard to secure funding for protection and restoration projects here in Terrebonne Parish, and I think it's safe to say that he is a fan of rocks. If you know Gordy, you know he likes some rocks. I also want to thank the legislative delegation. You know, CPRA staff, we had the opportunity to visit with legislators all across coastal Louisiana. And I don't know of a legislative delegation who is more unified and more committed to the issue of hurricane protection and coastal restoration than the delegation of Terrebonne and Lafourche. And we've got Representative Zerang and Representative McGee here with us, so I want to both thank you very much for what you do. But you know, all of these partnerships that we have in place and all of the organizations and partnerships that are represented here today, they're important, right? But they don't mean a whole lot if we don't have a governor who is just as committed to this issue as the rest of us. And thankfully, we have such a governor. In the last few months alone, Governor Edwards has flown over the entire Morganza to the Gulf Hurricane Protection System with Wendell Curall, Reggie Dupree, and Dwayne Bourgeois. He has celebrated the completion of levee segments, floodgates, and pump stations, and he has helped christen barrier islands and beach headland projects across coastal Louisiana. He spoke at Terrebonne Coastal Day, and believe me, he is talking to Reggie and Gordy and traveling down here almost as much as I am. So there can be no doubt that this issue is important to him and that he is helping the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority actually construct the projects that we have been envisioning for years. So here's a stat. Under his administration, over $564 million worth of coastal restoration and hurricane protection projects are under construction, with an additional $187 million that have been completed, for a total investment of over $750 million in Terrebonne Parish alone. So I would ask that you please give a Terrebonne Parish welcome to the governor of our great state, John Bel Edwards.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Gordy, don't have a heart attack. He didn't mention the $750 million that we're still designing and planning, because it is $1.5 billion in total, what we're doing down here in Terrebonne Parish alone. Thank all of you for being here, and good afternoon. Chip, thank you for the introduction and for your work. I'm excited because today's announcement is actually the fourth announcement that we've made just in recent months here in Terrebonne Parish and in Lafourche Parish as well. So last month we signed a CEA to build a new $65 million pump station at the head of Bayou Lafourche and an $18.5 million floodgate at Grand Bayou that closes a critical gap in the Morganza to the Gulf Hurricane Protection System. And last week we were in Thibodaux announcing storm protection projects for the North and South Lafourche levee districts. All told, $106 million in restoration and protection projects have been announced in Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes just in the last few months. As you all know, we are still in the peak of hurricane season. And as of this morning, it looks like the current system over the Bahamas is going to move up the East Coast and won't pose a threat. There are still 2 more systems behind it out in the Atlantic. It is never too late to put yourself and your family in a better position to withstand a hurricane. So for those who haven't yet done it, please get a game plan, and you can go to getagameplan.org. But because we're in the peak of hurricane season, and I know you all know what that means, I am particularly thankful to be here in Houma with more good news following last week's announcement. And before I get to the big announcement today, I do want to share with you that after the last hurricane, Hurricane Barry, came down and met with your officials, and we found out that we had a little additional work to do on the J2 segment of the Morganza to the Gulf. But we also, in the Gibson area, with respect to levees, we have some work to do as well. And so I'm working with CPRA, with legislators, and with your local folks here to move $12.5 million up in funding priority in the capital outlay system so that we can take care of those particular, I'm not going to call them weak points, but those points where we need to address them sooner than later. And that's following up on that commitment I made to you a day or two after Barry hit. So, Gordy, we're going to be working on that as well. But today's announcement I'm really excited about too, because I'm announcing that 2 barrier islands and 1 beach headland totaling $160 million investment will be going to construction off the coast of Terrebonne Parish. Now, to date, we have already constructed over 60 miles of barrier islands. Now, that's about the distance from Houma to New Orleans. Those 60 miles of restored islands and headlands have reestablished our community's first lines of defense against hurricanes. They protect our energy infrastructure. They help us to maintain important habitats for migratory birds and sustain important fisheries. And it's important and exciting that these are 60 miles of land that will be here for our children and our grandchildren. Today, we are happily adding another 7.2 miles to that number. You will recall that in 2016, we celebrated Phase 2, the completion of Phase 2 of the Caminada Headlands and a 13-mile beach restoration project. And that project was the highest dollar value restoration project completed to date. In 2018, we finished Whiskey Island in Terrebonne, which became the largest restoration project we had ever done when measured by the amount of sediment that had to be moved, dredged, moved, and placed at the project. And today we return to Terrebonne Parish to construct another #1 restoration project. When measured by the number of acres being restored over these 3 islands, this Terrebonne Basin Barrier Island and Beach Nourishment Project is the biggest one in the history of the CPRA. 1,100 acres of beach, dune, and marsh habitat will be built on the southern perimeter of the Terrebonne Basin, restoring portions of Trinity East, Timbalier, and West Bell Headland. Once complete, the people of this parish will have those 1,100 additional acres of frontline defense against storm and tidal surge, and that additional buffer will minimize the impact on levees, homes, and businesses in this region. Additionally, we believe that there will be at least 200 direct jobs on site for this project, and that it will utilize at a minimum 25 to 30 local South Louisiana vendors and suppliers. And this project is happening today, and this is further testament to how important partnerships are. This project is happening today because the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation has invested $160 million in this project. And I want to thank Tanner Johnson and the entire board of the foundation for working so hard with this, on this project and on many others as well. These NFWF funds were the direct result of the agreement following the Deepwater Horizon oil spill that occurred 10 years ago next spring. Throughout the oil spill and the settlement negotiations, we knew we had a plan for how to make a comeback. We had the Coastal Restoration Master Plan. Having this plan in place before disaster struck meant we didn't lose any time conceptualizing, prioritizing, or building public support for the projects, and we were able to get right to work. The Coastal Master Plan is a plan that many people in this room had a role in shaping, promoting, and ultimately passing through the legislature, and some of you more than once. So I want to thank Reggie Dupre, the former state senator and now Levee District Director, who was the lead author on the legislation that created the CPRA, as well as on the constitutional amendment that protected Go Mesa funding revenues for the purpose of hurricane protection and coastal restoration. I want to thank President Gordy Dove. You were instrumental while in the legislature and certainly used your role as chair of the Natural Resources Committee to advance these purposes. I want to thank Senator Narby Chabert. He wasn't able to join us today because he's been at a joint budget committee meeting, but also Representative Jerome Zarang, who's with us today, and Representative Tanner McGee, who's here with us, and everyone else who helped spread the word and build support for the Coastal Master Plan. I appreciate your hard work, and I'm proud to be here today with you making this large investment in your backyards. The state of Louisiana and CPRA in particular have a strong relationship with Terrebonne Parish that is constantly reflected in our ability to work together to build projects that work for everyone. And I want to thank not just Chip, I do want to thank Chip and Bryn, but everybody at CPRA because they work extremely hard in order to advance these projects as quickly as possible. While we have significant funding, as evidenced by the fact that we're moving forward with this project today, we are still way more resource constrained than we would want to be because our plan calls for $50 billion over 50 years. And why did we limit it to $50 billion? Because that's the most we thought we could ever possibly get. We could actually use more than that. Which brings me to the next point. The reason Senator Chabert is not here is because he's been at the joint budget committee meeting today, where we fixed the amount of the surplus from last fiscal year, the year that ended June 30th earlier. The surplus is up to $500 million. And that is a good thing for several reasons. One of which is a surplus beats a deficit. But secondly, because the Constitution limits what we can do to 5 things. And one of those things happens to be construction projects like coastal restoration and protection projects. And my commitment is that when we do the 25% for the rainy day fund, which is a good thing, and the 10% for the unfunded accrued liability, we will still have about $325 million there available. And we will do highway priority program projects with that. We're going to do deferred maintenance projects on college campuses with that money as well. And we're going to take a significant chunk of it and advance more coastal restoration and protection projects as well. And so I wanted to make that announcement and let you know that we continue to prioritize restoration and protection. And by the way, protection in many cases leads to restoration, and restoration in many cases leads to protection. So it's not like those are separate concepts at all. Finally today, I want to acknowledge Weeks Marine for being our partner yet again on this project. Together, CPRA and Weeks Marine have invested $500 million in work across coastal Louisiana. We cannot restore and protect our coast without strong partners in the private sector who are able to help us implement these projects in what are sometimes challenging conditions. I also want to thank the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management for working with us to secure the sediment for this project. And thank you to the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and Jack Montesay, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. Terrebonne Parish Government, Lafourche Parish Government, and the Greater Lafourche Port Commission for your support as well. You know, I have grown quite fond of reminding people that we will have more projects under construction this fiscal year than at any time in state's history. And this project is a strong reminder that it isn't just the quantity that counts. We're building bigger and better than ever. You need it, and you deserve it. And thank you for coming out today to celebrate it. God bless you, and thank you.
All right, next up, we're going to hear from Mr. Tanner Johnson from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation.
Thanks, Chip. Thanks, Governor. On behalf of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, its board of directors, first and foremost, and also as a citizen of Louisiana, I live right up the road. Congratulations to the governor, to Chip and the CPRA team on this amazing milestone. A lot of times when I'm speaking at things like this, I have to remind people who we are and why we're a part of this. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation is actually a nonprofit that was chartered by Congress in 1984. And throughout those many years, we developed a reputation as a strong fiduciary responsible for administering funds like these. And so it was after the oil spill that the Department of Justice tapped our organization to have the awesome responsibility of administering $2.45 billion in criminal settlement. Thankfully, half of that was earmarked for Louisiana in recognition of the damage that the oil spill did to our coast. These funds are unique for Louisiana. In that document that the Department of Justice signed off on with BP and Transocean, they can only be spent on barrier islands and river diversions. So we come to that point where we have a limited number of projects. They happen to be really important under the master plan. And so they bring us to this project today. With these funds, since 2013, NIFWIF has awarded over $600 million. That includes this grant of $160 million to 13 projects, all of them extraordinarily important and foundational to the state's master plan. As the governor said, we've restored the Caminada headland. We've advanced planning for the siting of critical sediment diversions, and we're accelerating the engineering and design for those projects. The start of this project, as the governor said, is the next step for the first line of defense for this parish and the communities in it. It also has thousands of acres of habitat for fish and wildlife, which is critical to the recreation and culture of South Louisiana. The last thing I'll say is this may seem like a fait accompli or something easy. The court told us to do this, NIFWIF has the money, we just hand it over to CPRA, but it's not. It relied upon an amazing partnership that Chip and his team has extended to our foundation. We really have become one team. And so I would dare say spending the money is easy. It requires a lot of responsibility, a lot of accountability and transparency, but it has been made easy by the team at CPRA, by the foresight of the master plan. So that's really the best part about this deal is we're putting dollars on the ground, and it's done in a partnership that I think and hope will live beyond these funds. The Gulf Environmental Benefit Fund is the title of this fund, but NIFWIF, we hope, goes on for a long time and will have the ability as a federally chartered nonprofit to assist the state in advancing the master plan for coastal protection and restoration. So thank you, Governor. Congratulations.
Thank you, Tanner.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. And first of all, I'd like to announce some of our council men and women who are here. Krista DePlantis Prather, John Navy, Al Mormon, Steve Trosaclair. They've already mentioned Reggie Dupre, Director. Parish President Jimmy Cantrell from Lafourche Parish. Thank you for coming, Jimmy. Also, Chief Coleman, our Chief of Police here in Homer. And of course, Ben Marlborough, I saw him back here with the Lafourche Freshwater District. And also Jack Monisset, who I served with for quite a few years at Baton Rouge. It was an honor and a pleasure. And now he's the Secretary of Wildlife and Fisheries, and it's great working with him. But first of all, I want to thank the governor of the state of Louisiana, John Bell Edwards, CPRA, Brent Haas, and Chip Klein for $160 million to restore the barrier islands. That deserves a round of applause. Plus $12 million for the levee system that Director Reggie Dupre and Tony Alford and the levee board are doing. A total of $172 million that's moving forward today. It's been unheard of. The governor's been with us, been there every step of the way. I served 8 years with him. For 8 years as a state rep, he was always with us on coastal restoration, and as governor, he kept it going now, but he's a little different now. He controls the money, so that's good, Governor. Thank you. But, I flew over the barrier islands with Chip and the governor and Reggie and Tony Alford and others. And one of our islands is Raccoon Island, which has segmented breakwater rocks. And like they said, that's our next push. especially with that surplus money. So we're not gonna give up, Governor. But no, you know, since 2008, we've completed 16 projects totaling $355 million with a total of over $435 million on the Moganza to the Gulf levee system. And there's a lot more happening now and in the pipeline. With this Barrier Island project and our ongoing Moganza project, that's $564 million in projects under construction, and we're looking at $984 million for 8 more in engineering and design so they can move into construction. All total, like the governor said earlier, $1.5 billion accomplished between Terrebonne Parish and the state and federal partners. That is fantastic, ladies and gentlemen. And you know, with that, we can move forward. You know, we finally a month or so ago, the Hurricane Barry hit. I want to thank the governor, GOSEF, CPRA, our state delegation. You know, 9 foot of water came into Terrebonne Parish, and 2 homes flooded on Terrebonne side in Pointe-aux-Chenes, and 5 on the Lafourche side, which that's still too many. Last time we had 9 foot of water, over 11,000 homes flooded. So what a step in the right direction. Thanks to the gentleman up here, a lot of stakeholders in this audience, and we're gonna move forward. And to move forward, we gotta work together, and this governor, CPRA, and administration really works well with us. So thank y'all, thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Governor and Chip, for being here. It is a pleasure. It's a great opportunity to discuss a very important project. And as the governor indicated, Senator Chabert was at JLCB. I was there this morning too, but he had to stay for a quorum. He wanted to be here and apologize the fact that he couldn't be here. But believe me, Governor, we heard about the $500 million surplus. We've already identified a few projects we'd like to talk to you about. Terrebonne and Lafourche, by the way. But the reality is how far we've come. One of the last things I was able to do, had the pleasure when I was working at CPRA, was execute the contract, which at the time was the largest restoration project, was the Caminati Headland project. It was right around 130, 140 million. And now it's over 160. I remember the time when we talk about $30, $40 million projects, and we thought, wow, that's a project. But it's these projects that have the magnitude and the footprint to address a lot of these issues. We have to talk on a watershed basis. The landscape and these projects have to be significant to address the problem of coastal land loss, and this project goes a long way to doing that. And that Caminati project, it's amazing if y'all hadn't been out there, and how you build it and build it right. We've had Barry, we've had other storms, and the project is holding up great. And if you look at the material that's going to be used at this one, from Ship Shoal, where you get the right size material, and not only is it good for the island and the sustainability of that island, it also introduces valuable material into the system, which is going to help the other Barrier Islands as well. So this project will continue to last for a long time and protect this area, because we all know how important the Barrier Islands are to the multiple lines of defense. We talk about multiple lines of defense. The Barrier Islands are important from a ecosystem perspective in fisheries. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we launched at Fouchon, we're over out at East Timbaleer fishing, and Jack, I must confess, a few of those trout we had to kind of squeeze to get them to 12, but they had a lot of fish, and it's great. Now, the Barrier Islands are important from an ecosystem perspective, but more importantly, they provide that multiple lines of defense. We looked at the storms and storm attenuation and the importance in trying to reestablish that tidal effect and reducing those impacts from storms, which we're experiencing much deeper and much sooner. And these Barrier Islands will go a long way in helping to reestablish that protection, in addition to the great work that the levee district is doing. And in combination with these natural protection measures, the terracing, the Barrier Islands, and the flood protection are going to be critical to this area and the people who live here. So, Governor, on behalf of the district here and the people of Terrebonne and Lafourche, we thank you for this project and supporting coastal restoration, which is, from us, it's our lifeblood, and it's the only way that we'll continue to survive as a community, is to have these restoration projects. And thank you, Chip, CPRA, and Governor, for being here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerome. You know, I was sitting back there thinking about what I was going to say and what could be said that hasn't been said already by the governor and Gordy and Z and everybody else who spoke, Chip Klein. And first, thank them for being here and doing all the work they did. But when I was sitting there back there thinking, I was thinking about what a storm means to us. You know, probably one of my earliest memories is my grandparents telling me about Hurricane Betsy and what it was like to survive Hurricane Betsy. I remember my mom talking about that as a young girl. It's her first memory is Hurricane Betsy. I remember my dad telling me about Hurricane Juan and how he was in charge of one of the shelters of last resort and what it was like and the experiences. And then I thought about my own. I was 12 years old when Hurricane Andrew came, and I can remember like it was yesterday. The impact. We all evacuated to Mississippi as we rode out Hurricane Andrew, then coming back and seeing my grandfather's camp completely roof torn off, and what that meant to us. And then flash forward a couple years, and I think we all know what happened next. Hurricane Katrina comes and devastates New Orleans. Terrebonne Parish, made out relatively well in comparison, but then we faced our own devastation just a little bit later with Hurricane Rita, and we saw what that devastation looked like. And there's many more storms that I'm leaving out that we can all have our own experience about. And so when I think about those storms, I think about those are moments in time for all of us, and not in a positive way. It's a lot like 9/11. I think we all experience as a nation, and New York experienced more maybe directly. But you have this moment of time, and it affects you for the rest of your life. And I think that's what colors all this for us. And so when we do this work, it's why I ran, and I think it's the most important thing we can do. And hopefully, when future generations come along and they tell their own stories, hopefully they're not increasingly worse like we saw, that they're not each storm more devastating than the last, that they can talk about it in a way that it wasn't disruptive to their lives. They went to school the next day, that that they got back together. We know we'll see those storms again, but hopefully this work means that our future generations can have a different experience and measure time in a different way. So with that said, I thank Governor and I thank President Dove for everything he said and for all the council members. We have one of the best councils on earth. I say it all the time. I talk to other legislators and they say they fight with their council members, and I've never experienced that. From parish government to me has always been supportive of me and what our efforts at the legislative model. And when they say that we work together as a delegation and we're unified, I think that's accurate and true. So with all that said, I thank everybody here. Thank you.
All right, to close, I know that there are several advocacy organizations that are here today. I see Mr. Jay Walker back there with the Morganza Action Coalition. We've got Simone Malaz with Restore Retreat and Susan with BitNep here. I just want to thank all of you for the advocacy work that you do on our behalf, the support that you give the coastal program. We could not have had the successes that we've had over the last several years without your support. And so I want to thank you. I want to thank you all for being here today. I would ask if we could get President Dove back up here. Any elected officials that are here in the audience, if you could just come up, we're going to get a couple pictures. I think it's huge, right? I mean, you just look around and look at the number of people here that you have, a number of elected officials. The governor of the state of Louisiana was here. I think the support behind coastal restoration and hurricane protection in the state is really right where it needs to be.
I'm excited, and you can see all of the local members of the legislative delegation, Parish President Gordy Dove, and others, and they're really excited about the work that we're able to do and how quickly we're able to bring the resources to bear where it really is ground zero. If you look at the whole coast, and by the way, we have challenges along the whole coast, but if you look at the Lafourche-Terrebonne area in particular, this is really ground zero in terms of where we've lost the most coast and where we can do the most good with restoration and protection. And so I'm happy to be back down here. The other thing that's exciting is the people in Terrebonne Parish and in Lafourche as well, they know how important this is because they have actually stepped up their game locally, and they have heavily invested over the last 2 decades in their own levee protection system. And so to be able to partner with them and come down and deliver additional resources for projects like this, it really is exciting.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Sure, they can go to our website at coastal.la.gov for any information on project types, project-specific information. There's a whole list of contact information for the appropriate staff that they can contact based upon the question that they need an answer to.